We are recording the interview of Roger Sloan. This interview is being conducted by Jeremy Tkach from the Wright State University's Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University in the New Media Incubator. It is 3:16 p.m. on the 25th of March, 2019. Roger, thank you so much for being here and participating in this interview.
I appreciate the opportunity of being here, Jeremy. I think this is a great idea, to be able to tell my story for generations to come.
That's exactly it. So let's start off with when and where you were born.
Okay, I was born in Danville, Ohio, which is 58 miles northeast of Columbus. I was born February the 15th, 1960. Grew up in Danville, Ohio, went to the Danville school system, graduated in 1960 as the valedictorian, class valedictorian. My intent was to go to college. I'd taken college courses my whole senior year, freshman through senior year, and had applied to Ashland College, was accepted by Ashland College. Then my parents told me, we don't have any money to send you to school. So my alternative was to join the United States Air Force. So I enlisted in the United States Air Force on August 29th, 1960.
All right. What were the who were your parents and what were their occupations?
Okay, my parents are William Franklin Sloan and Mary Elizabeth Walker Sloan. My father worked in the oil fields as an oil pumper, and my mother was a homemaker.
Okay. Do you have any siblings?
I have two sisters, Carol Jean Simpson, which is 6 years older than I am, and a younger sister, Karen Sue Simpson, 6 years younger. Both of them have passed.
So you're the middle child.
I was the middle child.
All right, and then so you said you joined the Air Force in 1960?
1960, that's correct.
And you enlisted. What was, so you said you wanted to go to college. Was there any motivation why you chose the Air Force over any other occupation?
Well, I'll tell you that I wanted to become a history teacher, college history teacher. That was my goal. However, without the money being available, at that time we had the GI Bill. So the GI Bill is what drew my attention to the military. And when I looked at all branches, for some reason the Air Force stood out. I had an uncle who was in the Air Force, and I think that probably kind of led me to the Air Force.
All right, so in 1960 you joined. You went off to basic, I
Yes, sir.
assume.
Went to Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas. 6 weeks of basic training, and then I received my first permanent duty assignment.
Tell me a little bit about basic training. How was that like?
That was an experience in itself. In fact, it all started when I left Columbus, Ohio on an airplane. That was my first airplane ride. So I was scared to death. We landed at Dallas, Texas, picked up a few more people, took off, and immediately started nosediving into the ground. I did not know we were landing at Fort Worth. So we landed at Fort Worth and picked up a couple more people and then went on to San Antonio. So it was a scary experience to start with. And then when the recruiter met us at the airport, I mean, this guy just jumped all over us and just chewed us out one side. And he put us in, lined us up, and then we were called the Rainbows because we all had on civilian clothes, different colors, and he then marched us to the Air Force bus. This was about 2 o'clock in the morning. Put us in the dormitory. About 2:30, here comes the first sergeant. Everybody up and out. So we all had to jump up, go outside, stand at attention, and they just berated us all. I think this is part of breaking the people down. And then the next day we were issued our uniforms and started the marching. I remember it was hot in Texas at that time of the year.
What time of year was it?
It was in August.
August, okay.
August, and it was 6 weeks. So we were marching past the Coca-Cola machine. And he would always stop us there, but would not let us get a drink. And I was dying for a Dr. Pepper, So we'd march around, and then even after that, he would catch you out by yourself, and he'd say, okay, quack like a duck. He'd make us crouch down, waddle like a duck, and go quack, 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 quack. And then through basic training, then we went into small arms, firing the M1 carbine. And then, of course, we had the physical fitness every day. Then we had to run the obstacle course before we could graduate from basic training. And that was a tough course because you had to run through the water, swing on a rope, climb a ramp, get to the other side. If you fell into the water when you're swinging across the water, they made you get up, go back, try it again. So then after the 6 weeks, we graduated. I was given my first stripe, and my first duty assignment was Plattsburgh Air Force Base, New York.
Did you do any, like a tech school in
No,
between?
I was a direct duty to Plattsburgh, New York. I went into the services squadron. So my first 18 months at Plattsburgh, I was assigned to the recreation club, or service club we called it. And the highlight of that was we had the Count Basie Orchestra come in, and I got to meet Count Basie. At that time, you have to realize in the 60s, we had a lot of African Americans in the Air Force, and of course, when we had dances, we had to actually go up to Montreal, Canada, and bring women down from Montreal. And one of my jobs was to ride the Air Force bus up to Montreal, go down, pick up these girls, bring them down to the dance, and then after the dance, take them back to Montreal. And so after 18 months in the service club, the services officer said, "Hey, you're an airman, second class now, 2 stripes." He said, "You're doing a great job. The NCOIC of the gymnasium retired." He said, "I want you to take over the gymnasium." I said, "You know, I can do anything. Yeah, I'll take it over." So as a 2-striper, I became the A1C, airman in charge of the base gymnasium. And shortly there, we had the Harlem Globetrotters come in for a basketball demonstration. And that was a highlight because here I am in charge. I got to meet all these folks. And then he told me, he says, the Air Force Inspector General is coming into Plattsburgh, and your facility is going to be inspected. I had 2 troops working for me, 2 airmen. He said, "You got to get this place spick and span." So it was in Strategic Air Command. In the Strategic Air Command, they always said, if it doesn't move, paint it. So we went around painting everything. We even painted the floors in the shower stall. So the Inspector General came in and we received an excellent rating, which was great, you know, for a 2-striper. However, the next day when people started taking showers, they came out with gray feet because the paint came off the floor. So after doing 18 months in the gymnasium, the Staff Sergeant Ehrenberger, who was the NCOIC, called me and he said, "Roger," he says, "you're going to have problems getting promoted in service," because at that time it was a support agency. And I was a augmentee to the security police squadron as well, which meant that whenever they had exercises, I went out and guarded aircraft. So during the Cuban crisis, old Tkach here was out on the flank guarding B-47s loaded with nuclear weapons and KC-97s, and we had this M1 carbine with no ammo. No ammo. We're out there walking the post, and the team chief come rolling by. It was wintertime. Come rolling by, and he rolled his window down about that much. And he says, "Airman Sloan, how you doing out there?" I said, "I'm freezing to death." He said, "Okay, see you later," and drove off. And it was cold. And we wore bunny suits, and your parka you had over your face, all you could see was your eyes. And it was a great time. It was a good assignment. At that time, of course, I forgot to mention my wife. I've known my wife since the last half of the 3rd grade, Sandra K. Smith, and we didn't date till we were seniors in high school. When I came out of Lackland, I stopped at home on leave and we got engaged. She was in cosmetology school, so I went on up to Plattsburgh, and she came up to visit one time. And then in 1961, July 1961, I went home on leave and we got married, and she joined me. She loved Plattsburgh because of all the snow in the wintertime. And I couldn't afford a car, so I had to walk to work. And we lived about, I'd say, a mile from the base. So I would walk from where we lived on Plattsburgh, on South Catherine Street, walk to work, and I was working some of the swing shifts, and then I got off at midnight. So I got off at midnight, I'd be walking home, and I wore heel plates on my shoes because I was sharp at that time, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And here she came walking up, and we'd meet about halfway. we'd stop at this little store, and maybe we'd have a nickel, we'd buy a candy bar, and that's what we would share, a candy bar, and go home. And it was like that for the first 2 years at Plattsburgh until I went home, and my father-in-law had an old 55 Buick Roadmaster. He sold it to me for $500, and I had to borrow $500 to get it. Well, while living that apartment in Plattsburgh, we lived up in the attic. The guy converted it to an apartment, and it had one of these fuel furnaces where he put fuel in it. And one night it went out, so I just lit a piece of tissue and threw it in. Well, the thing was full of fuel. Hadn't cut off. It started getting hot. The next thing you know, the stovepipes were getting red. I had to call the fire department. The landlord lived downstairs. He came running up. What are you trying to do? Set my house on fire? I said, no. I said, I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't see one of those stoves before. So Kay and I, we really enjoyed Plattsburgh. And our son was born in 1962.
Okay.
In Plattsburgh, New York, at the civilian hospital. And it was tough, Jeremy. It was tough living on $68, what I got in my pay. And my wife received $125 for being married to me. So that's all we had per month. So it was tough at the end of the month to have any money.
I was going to ask that question, how much you got paid a month.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's just such a stark contrast compared to...
Compared today.
Yeah,
compared today,
yeah.
I can't believe what...
Inflation and all that,
But the rent for our apartment was $68.34. So that took my pay. So we had to live on her $125. And we survived. We survived. We had a good time. And then from Plattsburgh, when the guy told me you need to make a decision, you're going to get out of the Air Force, you're going to stay in. I'd been taking college courses because that was my goal with the University of New York at Plattsburgh. And every night I was going to night school, building up the hours. And I told Kay, I said, I think what I'll do is try and cross-train into a different career field, one that's more promotable. So I was accepted for cross-training into the communications and electronics career field, which was at that time teletype, which no longer exists, teletype equipment, and offline cryptographic, which encrypted the messages offline. So I got accepted for that. So after 3 years at Plattsburgh, we got that old 55 Buick Roadmaster with a U-Haul behind us and drove to Shepherd Air Force Base, Texas, and went to tech school. 34 weeks in tech school. I was an airman first class at that time, three-striper. I was being an honor student while I was in tech training, and lo and behold, they had a promotion system at Shepherd that if you're in tech school, you're an honor student, we'll promote you. So I got promoted to staff sergeant. A nice pay increase that created a lot of problems with my fellow students who were mostly airman second or airman first. And I walked in as a staff sergeant. The instructor was an airman first class. And he came up to me and he grabbed my stripes and he said, those should be mine. I said, well, they're not. They're mine. And so I graduated as an honor graduate from tech school and then shipped off to Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico, Clovis, New Mexico, for my upgrade training.
Okay, so tell me about New Mexico then.
New Mexico, Clovis Air Force Base, New Mexico, Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis is out there in the middle of nowhere. All we had was a stockyard. That was the main thing, and boy, the smell was terrible in the summertime. In the wintertime, we get a little bit of snow, and you could watch the people, the New Mexicans who were used to driving snow, they just slide through the intersections. Again, I was taking college courses at the University of Mexico, Pueblo, what was it? Pueblo? Portales, New Mexico. Took college courses there, but I was only there 1 year. And so I only got a couple of courses in. But again, I was building up those hours toward my goal of becoming a history teacher. So after 1 year at Cannon, I received orders for Ubon Royal Thai Air Force Base, Thailand. Kay went home to Mount Vernon, Ohio to stay with her parents. And I went to Hamilton Air Force Base, California, for M16 training. We had to go out there for a couple of weeks. They taught us the M16 because I had been practicing with the M1 carbine. So they gave us the M16. We had to break it down, clean it, go out, fire and qualify, attach the grenade launcher, launch grenades from it. Then they actually had us throwing grenades by hand. So we were there for, I think, 3 weeks. and then boarded an aircraft to going toward Thailand. Of course, we flew into Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii. That was our first stop. We spent the night there, so I got a chance to go down to Waikiki Beach and look at the girls. And then we went to Clark Air Force Base, the Philippines. That was another stop. Then we flew into Saigon, Vietnam, offloaded some people. We got off the aircraft, and then we got back on that aircraft. I thought I was going to Bangkok. We flew into Bangkok, got off the airplane in Bangkok, and the sergeant there said, Sergeant Sloan at this time, get on that C-130, you're going north. I said, what do you mean I'm going north? He said, you're going to Ubon, Royal Thai Air Force Base. And there I was in the 1982nd Communications Squadron, and also did some work that I can't talk about.
What year is this?
That was 1964-65. I was at Ubon.
Okay, and I imagine Vietnam's kind of heating
Vietnam.
up.
What we were doing at Ubon, we had F-4s flying out of Ubon into North Vietnam with bombing raids. Lost a lot of pilots because they were shot down by the MiGs in North Vietnam. We had a change in wing commanders really quick because the wing commander led the flights into North Vietnam. As I was leaving, Colonel Robin Olds and Colonel Daniel Chappie James came in. I got a chance to see him, and I followed them then. I followed those two because they both were very impressive. Olds was the one that developed using the F-4s to fly like F-101 slow, because then the North Vietnamese did not know they were not F-4s. And they would come up to get the F-100s, and then the F-4s would take them over. I mean, they were just knocking the MiGs out of the sky. Chappie James was an impressive fellow. I really loved him because he was a big guy. And we used to say when he strapped on the F-4 when he got in, I mean, he's big, he'd get in that aircraft, and he was a guy that came to our NCO club. As I was leaving, he would come in and he would just mingle with the enlisted people. And of course, we drank a lot over there. That was one of the big problems. We drank a lot. And Colonel Olds was mainly going from Ubon back into Saigon for mission. One of the things that really, I'll be perfectly honest here, really disappointed me was I worked in the communications center. And I could see all the classified messages coming in. The politicians in Washington, D.C. were telling Colonel Olds, or the previous wing commanders, where they could bomb. They were actually running the war from Washington, D.C., which didn't really work well because they had no idea what was going on the ground. We had a tactical nav aid site, it's no longer classified, in Laos, and we'd have to send people over there to man that. We would take away all their identification. Air America, which was the CIA airline over there, would come in and pick up our guy, take him over to Vietnam, Laos, and drop him off, and he'd be there about a month manning the nav aid site. And that nav aid site was mainly for the aircraft coming out of North Vietnam. It gave them the coordinates to get right back into Ubon. So it was a new experience, and we all lived downtown. There was no quarters on base. The rank at Ubon when I was there was staff sergeant above. We didn't have any airmen because we couldn't train, didn't have time to train. We were working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. That was our shifts.
And how long were you there?
I was there 1 year.
1 year.
From October 1964 to October 1965.
So what kind of things did you do for fun? I know you didn't have a lot of free time.
Didn't have a lot of free time. The main thing was going to the NCO club, and I'd write home and tell my wife, I said, I'm here drinking scotch and eating ice cream. And she said, what are you doing, I said, well, there's not really much to do. There wasn't much in the town of Ubon. It was a small thing. Moon River ran through it. And when you went downtown, you normally ate the Thai food. So we didn't really have much recreation time. We did, when I lived where I lived off base, I lived with another staff sergeant and a master sergeant, and there was a girls' school right across from us. And they had what they called a rain day. When you'd get buckets of water, you just throw at people. So we would get outside our apartment and for water at the ties. And when the bot bus, it was called the bot because that's their money denomination, would stop at the stop sign there, we'd run out because all the windows were open and wet them down. And everybody'd laugh. Everybody's having a good time. You know? But yeah, it was a quick year, but it was some of the classified stuff was stuff I couldn't talk about. Still, it's still classified.
Now, I imagine you communicated home with your wife. How did you do that?
Cassette tapes.
Cassette tapes.
Yeah, she had a cassette player and I had one, and she would write letters. She would write a letter every day. But with the mail service, I wouldn't maybe get like 5 letters in one day, and I'd have to line them up so I'd get the progression. But we'd send a lot of cassettes just back and forth.
Do you still have those cassettes?
Probably so.
That's
Probably
interesting.
so, yeah.
Okay.
I still have some of her letters that she had written. I wasn't much of a letter writer myself. I'd write some, but I would get, like I say, she was writing a letter every day I was in Thailand. But maybe it would be 5, 10 letters you get all one whack. Said I have to line them up by the dates.
And
So
how long would it take to, from the time she wrote the letter to the time you received it?
it was probably 2 weeks. Probably 2 weeks between, yeah. So you see where the letters would back up. And I made the mistake of writing her a letter once, and in Thailand it was hot and rainy, but it was cool at night. So I wrote her a letter and told her, I said, you know, it's cold at night here in Thailand, so I got a package. It was a winter coat, a winter coat. So I wrote back and said, no, I really didn't need the winter coat, you know, because she thought it was cold like it'd been Plattsburgh in Ohio, you know. But it wasn't that cold, it was the difference in the temperature made it feel very chilly, you know. So I didn't need a winter coat though.
Okay, so you spent a year there, and then you came home, and this is what, 1965?
1965, and I'll tell you, you know, it was terrible. We were coming back on a contract flight, and they told us on the aircraft what was going on, you know, in Los Angeles at that time, and said, you know, you're gonna have to take your uniforms off. I said, well, you know, my civilian clothes are in your cargo hold. I can't change clothes. He said, well, people are gonna spit on you. They're gonna call you baby killers. And he says, it's gonna be tough. And it really was when we come out of the aircraft. Kay was there meeting me and my son, and they had ridden the train from Ohio to California. So we spent a few days in California, and I never wore my uniform. And we visited, you know, the different, can't even think of the place, Chinatown. We took the boat out around Alcatraz and stuff like that. And then on the way home, I stayed in civilian clothes the whole time. It was a bad time because the people protesting the Vietnam War. And years later, I could understand why. What I thought I was doing was for a country. I found out that the government's been lying to us, and that they really knew we could never win that war. We lost a lot of good people. The master sergeant that I roomed with didn't die from combat wounds, but he had a brain aneurysm and passed away. So it was the tour wasn't bad, but it's just coming back to the States and people didn't care for you. So I never wore my uniform in the States while I was at home on leave even. And that was sad because I was very proud of wearing my Air Force uniform. I was still a staff sergeant at that time.
So coming home, dealing with that, your next duty station?
Topsham Air Force Station, Maine. People haven't heard of that place. It was outside Brunswick, Maine, which was a naval air station. Brunswick Naval Air Station. They had the P-3s. I was with the 36th Air Division, which our job was to monitor the northern part against any kind of Russian invasion. We had 3 outlying sites, Caswell, Bucks Harbor, and Charleston. And they were like the dew line type thing across Canada. I was a teletype crypto maintenance guy, and I got to Topsham Air Force Station, Maine, and the chief of maintenance says, we don't have any teletype equipment. We don't have any offline crypto equipment. He said, we'll put you in the regular crypto maintenance shop. I said, okay, fine. So my job was to kind of learn the online, the KW7s and the KW26s. And we always took 2 people when we had to take a KW7 to one of the outlying sites, mainly for security. And lo and behold, I got promoted to tech sergeant. 6 years in the Air Force, and I was a tech sergeant. And I said, holy cow, how did I do this? But it was because in the 36th Air Division, they still carried on the books a position for a 363XO, which I was, teletype, and the promotion came down for that person, and it was me. So here I was, a tech sergeant, and Kay loved that area. Again, it was a lot of snow. She loves the snow. 36th Air Division was in a block building. You went in when it was dark, you come out when it was dark, so didn't see much daylight. Of course, we had the weekends. We only worked a 40-hour work week, which made it nice. So we did a lot of traveling around Maine. During the winter time, what was kind of unique was that when we got the heavy snows, they would release people from duty to go home to clean out your driveways because they didn't want anybody parking on the street. They wanted you to go into your garage. Lo and behold, I'd never had to shovel the driveway. When I got home, it was shoveled out. Kay and my son were out there cleaning the driveway, and I just pulled right in the garage. And you'd have the rest of the day off. Mm-hmm. So that was a good duty assignment. It was only 1 year, though. 1 year at Thompson Air Force Station.
And I'm sure you got to use your winter jacket.
I could use the winter jacket there. And after we left, it shortly thereafter closed down. They closed down the Thompson Air Force Station. And we were off to the Panama Canal Zone, Albrook Air Force Base and Howard Air Force Base. I had to go down first because you had to get quarters, which meant there was no on-base quarters, even though as a tech sergeant, you had to get quarters off base. I was working with the Chief Warrant Officer for, I'll never forget him, Mr. Ted Elliott.
Is this a Chief Warrant Officer in the Air Force?
Air Force.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's 1967. Chief Warrant Officer Ted Elliott. And he had a 1955 Ford Thunderbird convertible as his second car. So when I got there, for some reason, he took a liking to me. I don't know what it was. He was the chief of maintenance. And he says, take my car and go downtown and see if you can find an apartment. I said, Mr. Elliott, are you sure you want me to drive your T-Bird downtown? He said, yeah, go ahead. So I drove it down there. We found a nice apartment. Then Kay came down. And what was funny, when she landed, she got off the airplane, she says, you're not going to believe this, but all the way down, this light followed us from Charleston Air Force Base. I said, what do you mean? She was sitting at the window, looking at the wing, the light on the tip of the wing. She said, that thing followed us all the way. She didn't know it. Followed us all. She had never flown. Followed us all the way down to Panama Canal Zone. I said, that was the wing on the aircraft. I said, I didn't know. So we got living downtown in Panama, and at that time, we shipped our car down. She shipped it from Charleston when she went to Charleston. And I had the car then, and but before it arrived, Mr. Elliott let her drive the car. I said, what's going on here? He said, take the car, go downtown to the butcher market and do your shopping. And she did that. She loved it, driving this convertible. So we got our own car, and then we were still living downtown, waiting for on-base quarters. And we went out to the commissary. For some reason, we rode the bus home, and I had 2 bags of groceries. I happened to look down. I said, 1 arm, 2 arm, 3 arms. Some kid had stuck his arm in my front pocket, didn't feel it, and took my keys. If he'd have taken my wallet, he'd have got my pay because it was payday. He'd had all my money. And he took off running down the street. Well, here we are. We got to our apartment, had no keys. So I tried to call the landlord. He was gone. So we ended up sleeping out on the steps of the apartment that night, the 3 of us, until he arrived the next day, So, and we spent, we was on a 3-year tour at Panama. I worked at the communication centers, teletype maintenance. And then they sent me down to maintenance control. And that's where Mr. Elliott, his chief of maintenance, his office next to mine. So I took over maintenance control, and they said, you also have to become the ground safety NCO. I said, okay, I can handle that. So they said, well, you got to go to Mendoza, Argentina. I said, why am I going to Mendoza, Argentina? At that time, it was a classified site. We have a site down there, B-57s and U-2s that flew in there, and you got to go down, and we have a radio station. He said, we want you to go down and do a ground safety inspection. I said, yeah, I'm a teletype guy. He said, well, you can do it, no problem. Here's the checklist, just go down and do it. So I went down there, and I did the inspection, and of course the Argentine Air Force was great, but you flew in to Argentine Air Force Base in uniform. But when we went downtown to where we were living, we had to wear civilian clothes. Could not wear uniform off base. So I was down there for a week. I was supposed to be there a week. And I met the major down there, and he said, "How's your college going?" I said, "Hey, I'm up to the point now where I can apply for the Airman Education and Commissioning Program." And this was the program the Air Force had, that once you got 3 years of, and I had 3 years of college credit by then, you can apply and they'll send you off to a college for the last year to get your degree, and then you're commissioned an officer. He said, "Well, that's great." He says, "You'll make a great officer." So I'm down there and I'm supposed to be picked up by this C-130 coming out of Chile. So we're out on the runway, the tech sergeant, the radio guy, tech sergeant, myself with a portable radio. And we hear the C-130 coming, and the radio comes on and says, "Tell Sergeant Sloan that we'll pick him up next week. We're flying back into Panama." So I go back into the station, call Kay on the radio, "Hey, I'm not coming home. It'll be another week before I leave Mendoza." This went on for 3 weeks. The airplane would fly over, call us, pick you up, So finally they picked me up. I got back to Panama. And my son didn't recognize me because what I'd done is let my hair grow. I mean, I'm down in Mendoza, Argentina. I had a little goatee, And of course, the people at the Albrook said, "You got to shave." I said, "I'll shave when I get home." My son, he wouldn't have anything to do with me. He had no idea who I was. So I got back and I got accepted into the program, the Airman Education Commissioning Program. I said, "Man, here we go. I could probably retire." I was thinking, I could probably retire as a captain or a major. Think of the retirement pay. So they said, go take your officer commissioning physical. I did that. They said, "You're disqualified." At that time, my vision was 2400. I wore thick glasses. They said, "You can't go commissioning." I said, "Well, I don't want to be a pilot or anything. I want to be either an intelligence officer or in public relations." I said, "I can do that work, They said, "No, according to the regulation, you got to have your 20/20 vision, and you don't have it." So knowing me, I wrote to the Surgeon General of the Air Training Command, who had waiver authority, and came back, "Nope, you're not qualified." So I said, "I'll write to the Surgeon General of the Air Force." So I wrote to the Surgeon General of the Air Force, and it came back. This full colonel wrote me this letter. It said, "Sergeant Sloan, your eyes are so bad you shouldn't even be an enlisted person. Quit writing letters and think about getting out of the Air Force." I said, "Holy cow, I better quit writing." So I did. I said, "I guess what I'll do is focus on becoming a master sergeant," because at that time I didn't think I'd get beyond master sergeant. So I was taking all kinds of courses with the University of Florida. They had a place down there. And I was really piling up the hours because I was on a 3-year tour. And then Kay and I decided we'd extend the year to make it 4 years. So I was there 4 years. So every night I was going to school. Sometimes I was carrying 2 college courses. And then it came time to leave the canal zone. So our orders came in and said, "You're going to Pope Air Force Base, North Carolina, on the Flying Command Post." I said, "That sounds great. I like that." Very soon, another message came in. "That assignment's canceled. You're going to K.I. Sawyer, Michigan." Snow again. Kay, she's excited. "Hey, we're going where there's snow." We've been down in Panama for 4 years, rain and heat and everything. So I said, "Okay." So, but here comes another message. "No, you're going to Beale Air Force Base, California, where they have the SR-71s." I said, "That sounds good. Sounds good." So we shipped everything we had to Beale Air Force Base, California. As we're getting ready to leave, personnel called me and says, "You're not going to Beale, Sergeant Sloan. You're going to Davis-Monthan, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona." So that's where we headed. So we drove from Panama through Central America. In Chile, I was driving a '64 Dodge Dart. It was all gravel roads. A rock knocked my muffler off. It was raining, so I get out, wire the muffler back on. This Chilean came by on a donkey. And he looked down at me and said, "Muffler? Muffler?" I said, "Yeah, it's the muffler." He said, "Okay," and he went on. got the muffler on, and I drove by and honked at him and waved. Lo and behold, bang, there went the muffler again. So I'm under the car again. He goes by on his donkey. He said, muffler? I said, yes. So I took the muffler off and put it in the trunk of the car. I said, the heck with this. And then we drove on back through, went through Costa Rica and El Salvador, and going into Nicaragua, there was a guard standing there with a stop sign. So I stopped, and he's over there at his post, didn't wave me on. So I said, I drove on. He blew his whistle, come over, got in the car. So put his stop sign in my car. My son spoke a little Spanish, so we're driving down the road with this guy in the car. So my son says, he wants money. I said, what? Yeah, he wants money. How much does he want? So he told me, so I gave him some American dollars. So he had me stop, he got out, put his stop sign up, whatever stood beside the road. We went on. We got into Guatemala, and there was a Guatemalan soldier hitchhiking. So I said, I'll pick him up. Good old guy. So I picked him up, and he got in. We drove into Guatemala City, and he said, park here. I said, I know that sign says no parking. Don't worry about it. He says, I have the power. He said, just park here. He became our tour guide in Guatemala City. We toured Guatemala City. He took us around, showed us everything. The next day, we took off for Mexico. And of course, by having the diplomatic passport, we had no problem getting through. Drove into Laredo, Texas, to customs. The customs guy comes out and says, open your trunk up. So I open the trunk up, and there lays the muffler. He said, I thought you were awful noisy coming in here. He said, I want you to get that muffler put on. I said, I'll tell you what, when I get to San Antonio, I'll put it on. He said, okay, so he passes on through. So we spent the night in San Antonio with some friends that we'd been stationed with in Panama. And then Kay and I, we used to switch off on driving, so we never had to stop. 24 hours, we just back and forth. And when we got gas, we grabbed something to eat. Got back home and visited with the parents, and then got in the car and headed to Tucson, Arizona.
So you drove from Panama
through Central America.
Through Central America, all the way back up to Ohio?
Yes.
How long was that trip?
I don't know. I don't remember. All I know is we had to give the consulate in Panama, you had to type up, we know you're going to drive from Panama into Costa Rica, so stop at the capital city. That's what we did. We went from capital city to capital city to capital city. And we always took time to do a little visiting while we were there. I mean, you're there, you might as well. And we stopped in Guatemala and went out to the Mayan stuff, looked at the Mayan stuff. So I don't know how long it took us really, but I know my son had to go to the restroom. It was in the middle of the desert in Mexico, so he jumps out of the car. I don't know how old he is now. He's born in '62, and this is '71. That makes him about 9 years old, I guess. And he runs into a cactus, and he's got these cactus things on his leg, and he's screaming and hollering. So we pull him out, and we, like I said, we drove on. We drove. The only time we spent a night, other than at the capital cities, was in San Antonio. We spent one night there to visit with the friends, and then got up the next morning and took off for Mount Danville, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And like I say, I would drive so long, and Kay would drive so long, back and forth. And we did the same thing coming back to Davis-Monthan. It was at Davis-Monthan. I was with the Strategic Air Command again, working in the teletype shop. And we had U-2s there. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones that were flying out of Tucson. They flew down to Panama, then Panama went down to Mendoza, Argentina. So I was in the teletype shop there, was promoted to Master Sergeant. So 1 year later, I was on the move again. I was going to Incirlik Air Base, Turkey. So we didn't care for Tucson. Coming out of Panama, with the high humidity, we got to Tucson, where it's a dry climate. We really could not adapt to that dry climate. It felt like every time you took in some air, your nostrils were burning, your lungs were burning. So we were glad to get out of Davis-Monthan, even though I got promoted there, because it was. And the base housing didn't have air conditioning. They had what they call swamp coolers. I don't know whether you're familiar with this or not. Mm-hmm. All it is, they fill these things up with water, then run this fan blowing across the water, and that was to cool your quarters. Well, when you went to bed, you felt like you're sleeping in a shower because all that humidity in the house. So it was, and we had snow one time I was there, and we kept our son out of school so he could play in the snow. But it was a good tour of duty. I liked Strategic Air Command because everything was cut and dried. Here's what you had to do. And I had one troop that the first time in my military career who wouldn't behave, and I really had to ride him over full APR. I hate to do it, but I mean, the guy just couldn't hack it. And I found out later he was part of the Project 100,000. This was McNamara's plan where they weren't getting enough troops for Vietnam. They recruited people in a lower category. And they called it Project 100,000. They were Category 4 people. And they didn't expect them to be sent to Vietnam, but they were. And most of those people were killed off. They were actually killed. It was a slaughter for them. But I had this one troop, and he was a young airman, and ended up getting a referral, and we ended up booting him out of the Air Force. But then we went to Incirlik. At Incirlik, I was put into quality control, which was good for me. It was good for broadening my career field. So I was in quality control, and we had sites at Tkach, Turkey, Diyarbakir, Turkey, Ankara, another Elmendag, which is on the map, and then down in Iran on the Shah's Game Preserve, we had a radio listening post. So my job was just every 6 months we were heading around these places. When we went into Tehran, again we flew in civilian clothes. The C-141 says United States Air Force would land at Tehran Airport. This blue car pulls up, says United States Air Force. And we go out to the Shah's Game Preserve, and we put our uniforms on. When we left it, we'd put our civilian clothes back on. Now you knew the people knew we were military. This post was mainly listening into Russia. The other sites were troposcatter sites, which were focused in on Russia as well. Tkach, Diyarbakir, Elmendag. Ankh was just within the city, and it was good duty assignment, quality control. I enjoyed getting down to Tehran because people would give us a shopping list, and we'd buy all kinds of rock lamps, and we'd have a pallet full of stuff that we'd put on that 141. And when we landed at Incirlik, it would land at the end of the runway. We'd offload that and then go up to customs, and unload. But every time we went down there, we had a big shopping list. I mean, I had a wad of money to buy stuff, and the other guys did as well. It was normally 3 of us went down. One time coming out of Tehran, we had this airplane loaded with our goodies, and we overflew Incirlik. We went right into Ramstein, Germany. I said, holy cow, now what are we going to do? So I called my boss, Chief Master Sergeant Herb Green. We still communicate to this day. He said, where are you guys at? I said, we're at Ramstein Air Base, Germany. He said, well, get your asses back to Incirlik right away. So I told the other 2 guys, I said, we got to get out of here. So we went down to the air terminal and said, hey, we got a 141 leaving for Incirlik. I said, can you get our pallet on board that? They said, oh yeah, we got room. So we got on there and went back down to Incirlik. And he chewed us out pretty good. He said, why did you get on that airplane going? I said, we didn't know it. I said, that was the same flight going, they just overflew Incirlik. I guess they got some other message to go over. He said, well, don't ever do that again. So after 2 years at Incirlik, then I transferred again to Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland. Master Sergeant walked in there, and the Chief of Maintenance says, I don't need a Master Sergeant teletype maintenance guy, offline crypto. I said, well, why'd you send me here? Why'd you have him send me here for? Why'd you cancel my assignment? He said, well, you're here. He says, go see the squadron commander. And so I went and saw her. I said, they don't have a job for me, so I got a job for you. How would you like to be the enlisted career advisor recruiting these first-term airmen about re-enlisting? Piece of cake, man, piece of cake. So I did that. So I call them in, interview them like we're doing, and talk to them and give them all the benefits of joining the Air Force. If I couldn't convince them, I'd always say, well, if you're going to get out, join the Air Force Reserves or the Air National Guard. At least keep your time, And we recruited a lot that way. And then lo and behold, here comes the squadron commander saying, Sergeant Sloan, the first sergeant has retired. how would you like to be the first sergeant? I said, well, I can't do both jobs. The first sergeant wears the black hat. The career advisor's wearing the white hat, trying to keep these people in the Air Force. He said, we'll find somebody else to do that job. So I became the first sergeant. I said, do I get to wear the diamond? He said, yes, you do. We're giving you the AFSC of a first sergeant. I said, great. So I took over the first sergeant's job. The previous first sergeants, apparently, when one of the troops would get drunk and in jail downtown, would go down and pick up the troop. The first sergeant would. I said, that's not right. So the first time one of the troops got put in jail, I called his supervisors. I said, Sergeant, whatever his name was, join me down at the jail at Silver Springs. What are you talking about? I said, it's your troop, it's not my troop. I want you down there, and I'll meet you there. So we went down there, and he picked his troop up. The next day he came in. He said, why did you have me go down? I said, that guy faces you every day. I said, I doubt if he'll ever get drunk again and be embarrassed by having you, the supervisor, come down and get him. So I said, that's my policy. And the squadron commander stood back there, way to go, way to go. And I said, that's the only way to handle it. I said, I'll meet you there. I'll go down at 2 o'clock in the morning, but it's your troop, and it's your responsibility. So, and that worked well. So my father called me and said he'd come down with inoperable lung cancer. So we went home on leave, and he says, they're going to do radiation chemotherapy. I said, okay, I'll put in for a humanitarian reassignment to Wright back. So I went back to Andrews and told the commander, she said, go ahead and put your paperwork in. Before my paperwork could even leave Andrews Air Force Base, I got an assignment to Johnston Atoll in the Pacific. Johnston Island, a lot of people hear it called. It's a small island, 2.5 miles long, half-mile wide, located 825 miles southwest of Hawaii. They said, well, still go ahead and process your paperwork, but you got to go on the assignment. So Kay and my son, they went back to Ohio, and I went to Johnston Island. I get out there, and the det commander says, we don't need a master sergeant out here. I said, why the Lord do you let me come out to these places where you don't need me? He said, well, we only got one teletype machine, and that's down at the weather station. But he says, you can do a lot for us. He said, we're shutting this place down. He said, you're in charge of shutting the place down. I said, I can handle that. So the first thing we shut down was the air traffic control operation, because we're only getting 2 airplanes a week in. One was a 141 on its way to the Philippines for refueling, and the other was Air Micronesia. They came in there and landed. We had a small detachment of Air Force, and we had a small detachment of Army, and the civilians took care of the policing and ran the dining hall, which was nice because if you wanted a steak at 2 in the morning, you go and tell the guy, I'd like a steak, and they'd cook you a steak. The Army guys were taking care of the nerve gas bombs that had been built during World War II. They were in bunkers, and we all carried gas masks in case they leaked. Well, they had rabbits in there. As soon as one of those rabbits would die, the sirens would go off. We all have to put our gas mask on and hope the wind was blowing away from us because those bombs were all leaking. And then I found out later we had Agent Orange stored there. It wasn't until a few years back I found out we used Agent Orange at UBON on the around the perimeter. And here I've been in and out of that I don't know how many times. And now I was on Johnston Island with all these leaking Agent Orange, but nobody would admit that we had them. I submitted a VA claim. They came back and said there's no Agent Orange on Johnston Island. I said I could see the barrels. They said no, there's no such thing. So I did my year. Well, I did about 7 months because I get a phone call from Kay saying, hey, your father's passed away. So the deck commander, Captain Marvin Selden, never forget that. In fact, he's a full colonel and retired. He said, I'll divert a 141 in here and you're going home. And the next day there's a 141 out there waiting for him coming out of Clark Air Base. And flew home. Later on, Captain Feldman called me and says, your humanitarian reassignment came through today. He said, you got 2 choices, come back here and finish your tour, or go to Wright-Patterson and sign in. I said, well, my mother, she's going to need my help. I said, my sisters aren't going to be much help, and they really weren't. So I said, I'm going to have to stay here. He said, no problem. He said, we'll ship the stuff you left here back to you. I said, great. So I signed it at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as a master sergeant. And the chief of maintenance says, well, we're going to put you in quality control. He said, we don't need you in the teletype shop. We got enough people there. I said, that's fine. I said, I was at Intralic and I did, quality control. So I was in quality control. And I was in that for about 3 years, I guess, quality control. Now, I was stationed at Wright-Pat, believe it or not, from 1976 to 1982. So I was in quality control for about 3 years, and then they said, we want you to take over maintenance control like I did down in Panama. I said, no problem. I was promoted to senior master sergeant, which was nice. And I was in maintenance control when the blizzard of 1978 came through here and shut everything down. I was at home at the time, so I got in my car. I started driving to Wright-Pat. Got about a mile away from, we lived in Fairborn, a mile from our apartment. Couldn't make it any further, so I walked back, called the base, told the guys in maintenance control, I said, I can't get in. I said, I'm stuck. They said, don't worry, we'll send a four-wheeler out for you. So they did. Here they come. I got in, went to the base, was in the base for about 3 weeks, never made it home. All I had on was the uniform that I wore out there. And our job was to make sure we kept some of the aircraft facilities working because they were cleaning the runway. We said airplanes coming in. The base hospital had been pretty well shut down because ambulances couldn't get into the hospital. And so our job was to make sure we at least kept some of the stuff operating. So I got the Humanitarian Service Medal for that, during the blizzard of '78. Then I was getting ready. I wanted to go to Operation Bootstrap. I had the hours, right? So I filled out the forms and went up and saw the group commander, who was a full colonel. He says, no. He said, I'm not going to sign it. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're going to the Senior NCO Academy before you get your college degree. I said, well, I've already taken the Senior NCO Academy correspondence course. He said, I don't care. He said, you're going in residence. So I said, yes, sir. So I went down to Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama for Senior NCO Academy. And while down there, I had to test for Chief Master Sergeant, which was nice because we were learning all that material. And so I tested, came back to Wright-Pat, went and saw the colonel. I said, sir, I completed the Senior NCO Academy. Will you sign my bootstrap papers now? He said, there you go. So I came out here to Wright State. I think I had about 9 months to do. Received my degree, a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science. And then went back to work. I was a Chief Master Sergeant then, and they said, you're going to become the maintenance superintendent. So now I had all the maintenance troops working for me. This one troop came walking into my office one day and he says, Chief Sloan, he says, say hello to Jesus Christ. They had this rocket, he said, say hello to Jesus Christ. I said, how you doing, Jesus Christ? He says, he's with me all the time, man. He's with me all the time. I said, okay, that's good. I said, let's talk about this. So I got the secretary, I says, call the hospital and security police to have somebody come down and get this guy, So pretty soon here they come in, they took him up, put him in the psych ward, They finally, he got away from them though. They found him out on Interstate 70, walking down the median. So they brought him back and they finally discharged him. Then another incident was the staff sergeant who was my radio maintenance supervisor got promoted to tech. He said, I don't want tech sergeant. He said, I don't want the responsibility. I said, well, you're a tech sergeant now. Assume the responsibility. About 4 months later, he calls me on the telephone. He says, Chief Sloan, I'm going to kill myself. I said, what? He said, I've got a pistol here on my desk. He said, I'm going to kill myself because you're making me be making him to be the supervisor of the radio maintenance shop. I said, well, let's talk about this again. Called the security police, and they come down and got him. But later on, after he got out of the psychiatric department, I saw him at the commissary. They'd medically retired him. He came up and said, he said, you did me a favor by calling the security police. He said, I was really going to commit suicide. And I said, man, that scared the living tarnation out of me. So I was now the maintenance superintendent. Everything was going well. The chief of maintenance says, here, you got 2 second lieutenants you're going to train. I said, fine with me. I said, I'll train him. So the one guy was very receptive. He'd listen, he would do what I told him to do. This other lieutenant says, I'm a college graduate. He said, I know more than you do. I said, well, I'm a college graduate also. He said, you are? I said, well, yeah. I said, I got a bachelor's degree in political science. So I kind of shut that bit down. He said, I still know more than you do. I said, let me tell you something, Lieutenant. If you don't listen to me, you're not going to have a career. He said, oh, that's crap. I said, no, it's true. He says, I'll teach you a lesson real quick. So I went and saw the colonel. I said, Colonel, this lieutenant's not listening. He said, send him up to see me. He came back down. He says, Chief, he says, the colonel says they either listen to you or get out of the Air Force. That's my choices. So we kind of got developed in, but he didn't last. The other guy, he became my chief of maintenance. He became my boss as a first lieutenant. And he and I had a good relationship, and then I watched his career go. He became a full colonel. He was up at the Air Force Communications Service. So at least I knew that one took the training and progressed, right? So I was with the Northern Communications area, Chief Master Sergeant Parrish. I went up there a couple of times to sit on promotion boards and other functions, and he says, why don't you become a senior enlisted advisor? I said, well, I spent my whole career in maintenance, you know. He said, no, you'd be a good one. You listen to people, you deal with people. So he says, you're going to be receiving a message soon. So I got this message coming in from Germany. Brigadier General John Paul Hyde would like to hire a senior enlisted advisor. We would like for you to fill out your resume and send it to him. So I got my resume together, and I had to get the endorsement, of course, from the Chief of Maintenance. Went up and saw the Colonel. I said, I need your endorsement on this. He said, do you really want to do this? I said, yes, I think I really want to become a senior enlisted advisor. I said, I'll be meeting more people and helping more people, and that's really how I feel good about it. He said, okay. So sent the message off, and then a message is back that says, Chief Sloan, you're to come TDY to Ramstein Air Base, Germany, to meet with General Hyde. So I told Kay, I said, here we go. So I packed my bags, went to Germany, and General Hyde was, well, he must have been 6'2", big guy, smoked big cigars. So I went to his office, and I reported to him, and I sat down. Well, he's up pacing back and forth as he's asking me questions, smoking his cigar. So I finally said, well, here goes. So I jumped up, started walking with him. Back and forth, we're walking. I'm answering these questions. He says, Chief, why don't we both sit down? I said, sounds good to me, General. So he says, I'll tell you what. He said, you're hired, but I want you back here in 2 weeks. He said, I'm having my commanders conference. All the commanders from all the bases in Europe are coming in. I want them to meet you. I said, 2 weeks? He said, you go home. He said, I'll have quarters on base available for you. He said, you can only ship 2,000 pounds, so you can't ship everything over, and be here in 2 weeks. So we shipped. I left my son going to Wright State here, and we went and got there the day before Christmas, I think it was, when we finally got everything done, yeah. And that wasn't Christmas, must have been Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was because the person that met me at Frankfurt said there's having a party, so we went to that. So the next day I reported into the general. He said, I want you to pack your bags. You're going on your first TDY trip, and you'll be back in time for the commander's conference. You're going to Incubator Air Base, Turkey. I said, I know that place. He said, get down there. He said, I've been getting some grumblings. We need to find out what the commander's doing, what the first sergeant's doing, find out what the problems are. So I went down and did I was down there about a week, I think. Came back, and I wrote a report to him. He said, great. He said, that's good. He said, so all the commanders come in. He said, no, he said, here's your moment. Stand up and introduce yourself and tell them about yourself. So I did. And the first question somebody asked me, one of the commanders says, what about performance reports for the enlisted that we send up there for the generals to endorse? I said, well, I review them all, and I make recommendations. Who gets endorsed and who doesn't? And that's created an uproar. And the general says, Chief, he says, I think they don't understand that you either recommend the chief of staff, the vice commander, or myself. He told me, he said, but that's our policy. He says, he'll review them, and you send him up, and he'll make the recommendations. If he doesn't feel the person deserves it, it'll come back down to you. So that's how I started off then. So now I got to go out and visit these people. So the first place I went was, after Turkey, coming back from that, I went to Berlin. And I took Kay with me, we drove. So we got up to the gates, what's it called? That's something Charlie up there, I guess. We stopped, and they briefed me, and they said, okay, you're driving into West Berlin, but you got to go through East Germany. There's two guard posts up there. One is East German, and one is Russian. Don't go through the East German because they won't let you through. Stupid me. I go through, what I do, I make the right turn and get it to the Germans. The German guard post, I'm sitting there. Nobody's coming out. Kay said, what are we going to do? I said, I'm going to back up, turn around, and hit the Russian guard. So we stopped the Russian guard. They walk around the car, and search and look at you and everything. So we drove into West Berlin. Visited with them, got the tour of West Berlin and everything. And while we were there, they said, how'd you like to go over into East Berlin? I said, that's fine. Can I get back out? They said, yeah, we'll take it. The recreation center took guided tours over. So Kay and I, we went over to East Berlin. And I did the tour duty up there and then went back, made my report. So after that, I was on the road most of the time. I had to normally go up to Frankfurt to fly out to where I was going. So I decided since I hit Incirlik, I'd go back down there so I could visit the rest of the bases I'd been to. So they had a new first sergeant after I'd left, and I went down. He was all excited about me coming into Incirlik. So he put me in general officers' quarters. And they have one of these emergency phones. When you pick it up, it goes right in the command post in case something's going on. Well, he had some first sergeants sitting in there, and we're drinking a few beers. This guy picks up the phone, puts it back down. The next thing we hear is, all you in there, come out with your hands up. So we all go march out. Security police have surrounded the place. Get down on the ground. I'm in my uniform, so laying on the ground. And I turned to the first sergeant and says, this is not the way you start my visit. He said, I'm sorry. So we visited, and then they took me to Tkach, and then we drove up to Diebaker and to Elmendag and hit them all. I always hit them all when I went down into the country. And a lot of the people were still there that I knew. They just stayed. But so then I came back out. I told the first sergeant, I said, next time I come down, put me in the regular enlisted quarters. Don't put me in the general officer's quarters. He said, okay. But I never went back down to Turkey because I had so many places to visit. I had to go to Greece, visit all the troops in Greece, visit the troops in Italy, visit the troops in Spain. Now, going to Spain, I was normally on a C5, and lo and behold, it would break down every time we went to Spain. And they'd give you a couple of weeks to sightsee and everything. And they'd be out shopping, everybody's shopping, you know. And out of Spain, I'd have to go to Mallorca. We had a troop scatter site at Mallorca, and we'd have to fly out there. And then I went to England, and I had to go to Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, of course, Germany. Whenever I went to bases in Germany, I took Kay with me because she could talk to the enlisted spouses while I visited with the enlisted troops. And so she went with me to Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium, and of course over into Berlin. But it was one of the better jobs I ever had because it was a matter of going in and really listening to people complain. They wanted somebody to complain to. And one of my fortes was I could remember names. And I'd have the first sergeant send me a list of who the key people were, so I got their names. So I'd walk into the work site, I'd call them by their first name, and you know, they just beamed. You know, this guy knows who I am. I had never met him before in my life. And normally what I'd do, the first sergeant would always want to tag with me because he wanted to hear what was going on. I'd say, you just stay in your office, you just get me where I need to go, then you leave. Because I said, the people will not open up if you're around. And they would really open up and tell you what really was going on within the unit. Most units were doing great. You'd have a few people complaining, but it was personal type complaints. And I only had one unit where I had to go in. It was the captain was the commander, and the first sergeant was the master sergeant, and they had serious problems. And it was mainly because the captain wasn't being a leader. So I told him, I just said, Captain, you know, you're not being a leader of this organization. I said, you and your first sergeant are kind of just letting people run wild out here, you know. He said, well, what are you going to tell the general? I said, just what I told you. You're not leading this organization. So I went back and told General Hyde. He said, well, he said, I had that feeling, but I just wanted to hear it from you. He said, your recommendation is? I said, move the guy. I said, he's not doing the job. I said, I don't know whether the first sergeant's having the problems because he's under this captain or not, but I said, I think we ought to remove them both and start with new people. And they did that. So then General Hyde gets an assignment, right? Here I am, been there just about a year and a half, and he gets an assignment. Brigadier General James S. Cassidy, not Cassidy, but Cassidy, and they told me that they didn't like to be called Hopalong either. So he comes in, right? And one of the policies with the senior list advisor is you work at the whims of the commander. So he came in after a week, he hadn't said anything. So I knocked on his door and I said, General Cassidy, I said, I'm turning in my resignation. I said, to give you the opportunity to hire whomever you wish. He says, Chief, let me tell you, when I tell you to take your curtains down in your office, then you're done. And he never told me to take my curtains down. So I worked for him, and he was the greatest guy to work for. He looked out for me like we was flying back to Scott Air Force Base, where our headquarters was at. And we flew up to Frankfurt to get on C-5, and of course the C-5 had broken down. So we went over to the international airport to get on a commercial flight. And my luggage got on the flight, and the general and his luggage got on the flight, but there was no room for me. So the general says, he said, I'll see you at Scott when you get there. I said, okay, sir, I'll see you there. So I was able to catch the next flight. Flew into Scott. This chief met me, right? Took me out to the airman dormitory where my room was at. They had what they called chief suites, which were really plush places to stay. And this airman working the desk says, Chief Sloan, he says, this brigadier general brought your luggage in, and he told me to tell you to call him when you got here. He says, how did you get the general to carry your suitcase? I said, I'll tell you what, when you become a chief master sergeant airman, I'll let you know. He said, okay. So I called General Cass and said, I'm here. He said, great. He said, I was concerned that you weren't going to make it. So that kind of started a good relationship. The next trip, I'm down there, and we get on an airplane, and Kate took me down to the flight line. He turns to me and said, I was going to kiss your wife goodbye. I said, General, you're very familiar with public display of affection. It's not permitted out here, you know. He says, Chief, I'm ordering you. Kiss your wife, get on the airplane. So I did that in case that she couldn't believe it. So he had his aide, his captain, look out for her while I was going on all these trips. If she needed anything, all she had to do was call the captain. So lo and behold, at the 3-year mark, I get an assignment, and he gets an assignment. He's going to Space Command Division, Colorado Springs, and I'm going to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So we shipped everything to Wright-Pat, and we stayed in contact. And I was coming back to Wright-Pat to be the senior enlist advisor to the Logistics Communications Division, which was just being developed. And they said, you're the guy to come in here. All we had at the time was Colonel Reed, who was the commander, a secretary, and a civilian. That was LCD, Logistics Communications Division. And I arrived as the senior enlist advisor. So they said, okay, we want you to write position descriptions for the different jobs. And also you need to travel to Hill Air Force Base to visit the troops there, McClellan Air Force Base to visit the troops there, Kelly Air Force Base, Texas to visit the troops there, and Robbins Air Force Base, Georgia. I said, I can handle that, no problem, yeah. So I did that while I was doing that. Then we started building up the division. Then the the senior enlist advisor for Air Force Logistics Command, Chief Bowerman, called me in his office. We want you to apply for the job at the Air Base Wing. I said, look, Jack, I said, I have been in Air Force Communications Service most of my career. All I know is Air Force Communications Service. I really don't know anything about Air Force Logistics Command. So I was down at Kelly Air Force Base, Texas with Chief Bowerman. He was visiting the logistics troops. I was visiting the comm troops. Chief Master of the Air Force, Sam Parrish, was there. So Sam comes up and he says, Roger, you need to apply for that job at the Air Base Wing. I said, Chief Parrish, he said, look, we met in Turkey, in Germany, you remember? He said, we're at this bar and you and your wife were there and I was there, I was traveling. I said, yes. He said, you were doing a fantastic job at the European Communications Division. He said, I got good feedback on you. He says, being in Air Force Communications Service, you never owned a base. We were always just tenant units. We belonged to somebody else. I said, I don't know, Chief. I just don't know whether I want that job or not. He said, well, just go over an interview. He said, you may not even get it. So I said, okay. So I went over an interview with the vice commander. I can't even remember his name, but his first words to me were, Chief, what do the people in Wright-Patterson think I am? I said, well, Colonel, they really don't like you at all. They think you're a blah, 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 you know. He said, that's what I wanted to hear. He said, I wear the black hat in this organization. I said, okay, Colonel. He said, I want you to go in and interview with Colonel Fox. He wears the white hat. I said, wow. So I went to see Colonel Fox, and Colonel Fox was a laid-back guy, and I still communicate with him. You know, we developed that relationship. And he's asked me all questions about my career this far. And he says, do you really want this job? I said, well, I'd like to have it because it gives me a base to work with. I said, I got people that I own. The other people were just tenants. So after all these questions, he gets up and says, you got the job. He said, I want you to start work here on 1 January 1976. I said, well, I got to tell Colonel Reed, give him a warning that I'm leaving you. He said, well, you go back and you tell your colonel that you're coming over here. I said, okay. So I went back and saw Colonel Reed. He said, I knew when you went over the interview, you would be back. He said, we got another guy coming in to take your place. I said, okay. So I took over as the senior list advisor for the 27th 50th Air Base Wing, which was probably the best job I ever had because I had people, you know, the personnel people, the security police people, the civil engineers. And the only problem was at Wright-Patterson at that time, we had a senior list advisor down in Area B for the Aeronautical Systems Division. We had a senior list advisor at the FTD, Foreign Technology Division. I thought that was floral telegraph delivery when I arrived at Wright-Patterson originally. And they had one out at the reserve unit on 445th? I don't remember.
445th.
So I said, well, I got to develop a relationship with these guys, you know. So, you know, I've got met with these other chiefs. Yeah, we had to go. And the first sergeants at the Air Base Wing worked for me, so I could either fire them or hire them. And they had their own first sergeants. So I had a good crew of first sergeants, never had a problem. But I had this one guy come into the 1815th Engineering Squadron. He was a tech sergeant, and he's wearing a diamond. I said, wait a minute, you got to be a master sergeant to be a first sergeant. So I called him in my office. And he's still here as a preacher here now. I said, what are you doing wearing a diamond as a tech sergeant? He said, well, I'm a master sergeant selectee. I said, that's good. I said, just tell people. I said, everybody's complaining. What's this tech sergeant doing as a first sergeant? Just tell them you're a master sergeant selectee, and you'll be putting your rank on soon, and just tell them, you know, because I said, people are wondering why you're walking around the base. So he did that, and that worked out well. So when he retired before I did then, and he went to theological school and became minister. He's a minister out in New Carlisle now. So again, we see each other. Colonel Fox, he got an assignment. I can't lose here. So he left to go. He got promoted to brigadier general. So I said, well, I did something right. He got promoted. So he went to Hill Air Force Base, Utah, as the vice commander. Colonel Kohler, who was now the vice commander, became the commander. So again, I turned my resignation into him. He comes down the hall and says, you're fired. Fine, no problem. So I called down to the comm group. I said, hey, I need a job. They said, no problem. You can back down here. You'll be either the maintenance superintendent or something else. Yeah. So I went, Colonel Kohler, I got a job. He said, what do you mean? I said, you told me I was fired. So I called down to the comm group, got a job. I was just joking, Chief. He said, you still got the job. I said, well, you know, you didn't sound like you were joking. I said, that, you know, normally I work at your whim. You said fired. I said, okay. So I'd like to backpedal a little under Colonel Fox. He got me one time. I was pushing this senior master sergeant for chief master sergeant. This guy was sharp. I mean, he should have been a chief. So they did a retreat ceremony at the Air Base Wing. Colonel Fox is there, I'm here. The first sergeant's out there. He was the first sergeant at the time. Colonel Fox turns to me and says, is that the guy you want promoted to chief master sergeant? I said, yes, sir. He said, how sharp he is? He said, oh, yeah. I said, 2 days later, he comes down to my office, lays this OSI report on my desk. He said, Chief, read this, and then come see me. And guess who that was about? that first sergeant. So I get down, he said, what do you want to do? I said, number one, sir, we have to court-martial him. He said, you made the right call, Chief. He said, we're going to court-martial him, and we did, and he got demoted to tech sergeant. But what he had done was, his wife had gone to California, got a couple female airmen, and they reported him for basically sexual harassment, you know. So he blew his career. He came in my office crying. And I said, you did it to yourself. You did it to yourself. I said, there's nothing I can do for you. I said, you had a great career. I was pushing you for Chief Master Sergeant, and you blew it. And then lo and behold, this other Chief Master Sergeant comes walking in later. He says, am I under investigation? I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, he said, I went over and knocked on that guy's door, and he told me to come in. He had a couple female airmen in there. And he said, just about like I almost walked through that door. I said, but you didn't, did you? He said, no, I went back home to my wife. I said, well, you made the right decision. I said, no, you're not under investigation. But I had another one down the band, another Chief Master Sergeant. This Airman First Class comes in my office along with his supervisor, a tech sergeant. And they say, Chief, he says, the chief down there is having an affair with my wife, who's also a member of the band. I said, okay, I'll take care of it. So I go in and see the wing commander, Colonel Kohler. I said, sir, I need to get down to the band and talk to the band commander. I said, here's what's going on. He said, okay. So I went down and saw the band commander. Oh, yeah, I knew about it. I said, he's Lieutenant Colonel. I said, sir, you have a responsibility here, you know. You should have stopped it right away. Well, I'll talk to him, you know. I said, no, it's going to take more than talking to him. He said, well, that's all I'm going to do. I said, okay. So I called Chief Bowerman up at the command headquarters, because it takes a general officer to court-martial a chief. And I told him, I said, hey, the Lieutenant Colonel down there is not going to do anything with this chief. So the next thing you know, the two-star up there is calling a general court-martial on the chief. And he was demoted, and he elected to retire after his demotion. But again, that was nice because they could help somebody. But again, I was sad because we were losing some really qualified people, but that happens. Mm. So at the end of, Colonel Kohler got an assignment. A new colonel coming in from Altus Air Force Base. He was a SAC wing commander. So I called the chief out there. He said, fill me in on this guy. I said, I only have 1 year left. I hit 30 years, I'll be retiring. I said, but I want it to be a happy 1 year. He said, I'll be perfectly honest with you. He said, you don't want to work for this guy. I said, he's very arrogant. He doesn't particularly care for enlisted people. He doesn't particularly care for civilians. They always come to the wrong place. Wright Patterson's mainly civilians. I said, okay. I said, I'll put in my retirement papers. So I went and saw Colonel Kohler. I said, you're leaving, I'm retiring. He said, why? I said, I don't think I would be happy working for this guy coming in. And why should I be unhappy for 1 year? I want to leave the Air Force with a good feeling. He said, that's your call. So I went ahead and retired at 29 years. My retirement date was August 31st, 1989. And I made the right decision. The guy that took my place lasted, I think it was about 3 months, and he volunteered to go to Germany. So I think I made the right call. But I had an excellent career. And the only thing I missed after I retired, Jeremy, was the people. Mm-hmm. Are we running along?
No, we're good.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I retired. Mm-hmm. And everybody said, are you going to get a civil service job? I said, no. I said, I really want to retire and just kind of enjoy myself. I said, I'd like to be back into the library, do some reading. And my wife said, when are you going to get a job? I said, I really don't think I want a job right now. She said, well, I'd like to become a bank teller. And I knew the vice president of Bank One, because I'd been going to all the Fairborn events as a senior list advisor. I met him there and cultivated a relationship. I said, my wife would like to become a bank teller. He said, go home and tell her she's hired, report down to the Bank One at down there near the WHIO TV station right there on is it Wilmington? Patterson, I think. I don't know what it is. But she went down there the next day and had a job.
Mm-hmm.
So I started taking care of the house. I did all the housework and prepared meals, so she had a meal when she came home, and sent her off to work in the morning. I go to the library, and she says, "How do you do the sweeping while I'm going?" I said, "Well, here's my plan. Mondays I take care of this room. Tuesday I take care of that room. Wednesday she says, "No, you sweep the whole house at one time." I said, "Why?" I said, "I do each room." I said, "It gives me something to do every day." And I just start over. I said, "No, that's not the way you do it." I said, "Well, that's the way I do it." So after about, I guess I've been retired a couple of years, and I get this call from this friend on base saying, "Hey, the Army Times Publishing Company is looking for a distribution manager. They want somebody here who can make sure the Air Force Times, the Marine Times, the Navy Times, and these Federal Times gets delivered on base and so forth and so on. It's just a part-time job." I said, "I can handle that, plus I get to read the Air Force Times for free." So I took the job. So I was doing that, and I had to go to Columbus, to the Federal Building in Columbus, and I had to go to Rickenbacker, which was bad in the wintertime. So I did that. I just delivered the papers around. People said, "Are you happy doing that?" I said, "Yeah, I'm happy." "Don't you want a civil service job?" "No, I don't want the headaches, you know." "Well, you ought to get a civil service job. We got one open down here for you if you want it." I said, "No, I don't want it." So later on, the senior master sergeant chief approached me. "How would you like to join our company? We're starting a new company." "Oh, that sounds great." I said, "I still deliver the papers, be part of this company." So it's called Plan Quality USA. I said, "It sounds good." He says, "You have to invest $2,000. Okay, $2,000. I said, "What's my job going to be?" "You're going to teach statistical process control as used in quality control." I said, "Well, I don't know anything about statistical process control." I said, "You better go to the library and start learning." I said, "Okay." So we got the company going, and my job was to go to different manufacturing companies and teach this process. And one of our biggest was the Macaulay propeller thing out there near the airport. They made propeller blades. And they came to one of my sessions, which I did at Edison State University. They had me come in there and teach this statistical process control, which I love because now I was in the college environment, right? And the guy went back to the company and said, "Hey, you got to get this guy to come to the company and teach this course." I did. And they had me coming back. So I was doing that. I went down to a few manufacturing firms in Dayton. And we had, our main business was the Troy Pipe Company. They made pipes for cars and mufflers and so forth. And they said, "We would like to," right now they were doing 100% quality control. They said, "With your process, we could cut down the quality control inspection." So that's right. I said, "Statistical process control, statistically, you're going to find so many bad problems." I said, "What you do is you let the people on the line, when they pull off, they find it's bad, they stop the line. You don't keep pumping out bad product." "Oh, okay. So how many do we have to count?" I said, "Well, we'll figure that out. There's a process to figure it out." And we found out, they would go like maybe 15 items, and after 15, the machine would adjust over a little and start doing bad. So they said, "With 14, you'll check it. 15, check it, and if it's showing slight, then you stop the line, and we readjust everything." And that seemed to work well. So I did that for a while, and we had poor marketing. The guy who was supposed to do our marketing didn't do very well. He didn't know how to get the word out that what we were doing. There was only 3 of us. And I was the main one that was doing the teaching. The other guy taught mathematics at Edison, and he also taught it to the plant there in Troy that, what was that called? Hobart.
Mm-hmm.
Hobart Company. And then we taught over at Greenville. I used to have to go over to Greenville, and they had a station over there. But I enjoyed that. So I did that for a while. I could see this company's not going anywhere. So I told the main guy, I said, "I'll tell you what, why don't you give me my $2,000 back, and you guys can go and do what you want." He said, "Okay." So he gave me my $2,000 back, and I received a phone call from Colonel Fox, my former wing commander. He said, "Hey, Chief, my son is starting a business, in Anderson, South Carolina. He said right now he has a nursery. He says, but this professor at Clemson has developed a process for being able to grow plants more quickly. That sounds interesting. He said, you're going to have to come down and interview with my son and with this professor. So I went down to Anderson, just outside of Clemson. It was, can't think of the name of the little town. And they interviewed me, and Kay was with me, and we went out and looked at their, they said, do you think you can do this? I said, I can do anything, once I get the knowledge. So we got to go to Clemson for a while and work with this professor. I said, that's fine. Now the professor was a nice guy, except this process that he had developed was his baby, and he didn't really want to turn loose of the information. So my first job was to build a facility on this piece of land, a big building. Now I had the decal on my car that said, U.S. Air Force Chief Master Sergeant. The building had no signs on it, just this big building. And when I go into town, people would say, there must be something secret going on out there. Why would they have an Air Force guy out there at this building? My job was just to set up the building and get everything put in it, So I was going to Clemson during the day, and at night there, Kay stayed up here at Wright Pat. Well, we were in Fairborn then. Not Fairborn, no, we was out in Forest Ridge, we bought a house. So I was down there, and I'd learned the process and got the process started. We could take a hosta plant, which normally takes 2 years to get started. We would put in this process that we could have it ready to go in 90 days. Strawberries, we could get them quickly. And we were producing strawberries for North Carolina because in their soil they had a disease. So the strawberry crop, when they had it, we'd have to do plants, and we were providing plants. We were also growing flowers for like Myers and stuff like that. So the process was pretty neat. It was just some chemicals and lights and rocking them back and forth, nutrients and not nutrients, and putting them under a light on this table. It was amazing how fast these plants would grow. So I was down there, I guess, about 6 months. I said, I've done all I can do. The guy's got his business going. So I saw the colonel. I said, he's on his own now. I said, he's got everything running well. He said, well, he just got a job offer with J.C. Perkins and seed company. He'll be leaving. Fine. So I came back here. And the year 2000, I had not a heart attack, but I was having chest pains. I was up at Kay's parents visiting over Christmas, and I get, oh, that hurt. So I was driving back, oh, that hurt. So we got back here, and Kay says, you need to go to the emergency room. I said, I don't have any pain. She says, you need to go to the emergency room. I said, I'm not going to the base emergency room because you normally sit there until you have a pain and they call you in. She said, well, why don't you call him? So I called this nurse. I said, this Chief retired Sloan. I said, I had chest pains. He said, well, you need to get in here right away. I said, well, if I come in, will I see a doctor right away? I guarantee it, she said. I said, I'll be there shortly. So I went in. They checked me over. They took me upstairs. They put me on a treadmill. I couldn't do that. They ran a cath up my leg, and I was watching them, Bang, they hit that black spot. They said, oh, we're giving you a heart attack. So they gave me nitroglycerin, called an ambulance. They had this big machine, put me down in the emergency room and said, we're taking you down to the Dayton Heart Hospital. So I'm laying there, and I can hear everything going on. This ambulance driver comes in. He says, I'm here to pick up Chief Sloan. He said, that's him there. He said, well, what's that? That machine's got to go with him. He said, I can't get both of them in the ambulance. They said, well, he's got to stay connected. That's pumping for him, So they said, okay, we'll squeeze him in. And then the doctor had to get in, and a med tech. So the doctor's sitting on the other side of this machine. And he leans over now and says, Chief, don't anything happen? He says, I can't get to you. If you have a heart attack, you're going. I said, holy cow. Now the tears are running down my eyes. And that ambulance takes, they must have been doing 100 miles an hour down to the Dayton Heart Hospital. Kay couldn't keep up with them in the car. Went in that night. The next morning, they cracked me open to the triple bypass. And that made me a believer. I need to do something with my life. So after I healed up with that, I said, why don't I become a substitute school teacher? That's what I've always wanted to do. So I went down to the Mad River School District and applied, and they accepted me. And they said, okay, now you're going to be going everywhere from kindergarten to high school. I said, okay, fine. So I started teaching. I really enjoyed the kindergarten. The kids, they really want to learn everything. In fact, this one kid went to lunch and he came back and he's putting his coat on. I said, Johnny, what are you doing? He said, I'm going home. I said, no. I said, when you were in preschool, you only did a half day. Now you're going full time now. And he said, and who in the hell signed me up for this? I said, well, I suppose your parents did. I said, take off your coat, you're staying. He said, okay. So then I was in the second grade, and I'd lost my finger doing a splinter. And the student came up to me and said, Mr. Sloan, he says, how did you lose your finger? I said, children, listen. I said, what I'm about to tell you, I don't want you ever doing. I was picking my nose, and when I pulled my finger down, it was gone. And the moral of this story is, don't pick your nose. Oh, Mr. Sloan. So I know they went home and probably told their parents that the teacher lost his finger up his nose. So I did that for about 2 years, and it was doing well. I enjoyed the middle school, I enjoyed the lower grades, and I enjoyed the high school. High school was no snap. They come in, you tell them, here's what you had to do for that day, and they would do it. And then they put me in the middle school. I'd done it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, but now I was going in there for a whole month. And these kids, 7 and 8-year-olds, the hormones are running crazy. No respect for the teacher. They knew as a substitute. They presumed I was only going to be there 1 day. So they would give me a hard time. And this young girl, she was constantly disrupting the class. So I called the principal, and he came down. He said, now listen, Mr. Sloan's in charge of this, blah, 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 blah. You all behave. Well, as soon as he went back to his office, here she comes again. So without thinking, I just said, you get the hell out of my classroom. And she went to the principal's office. Here he comes. Mr. Sloan, you can't say that. I said, well, you come up here and told him I was in charge. Well, I was in charge. He said, okay, but don't ever let that happen again. So I did that for quite a while and really enjoyed it. I joined the Veterans of Foreign Wars, became a life member of that post 3283 in Huber Heights. And that was based on my Southeast Asia experience because I'd received the Vietnam Veterans Medal with 4 battle stars. I had joined the American Legion in Danville, Ohio because my father-in-law was a World War II vet. And he had served during the going on to Normandy. He didn't go on to Normandy at the beginning, but he went across later. And he would never talk about his war experience. And so he was the man. He said, why don't you join the American Legion? I said, well, okay, I'll join. So I joined the American Legion to be with him mainly. Of course, I was living up here, so I didn't really make the meetings or anything. So finally, he got aggravated with the Legion folks, and he quit. I said, okay. I said, Dad, is it okay with you if I just join the Legion in Fairborn, Ohio? He said, do what you want to do. So I joined the Legion in Fairborn, Ohio 20 years ago. And the first thing they did was they said, we need a chaplain. As you can see, it says past chaplain. Yeah, I said, chaplain. I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. They said, well, tomorrow we're having a funeral. And they have requested you to do the service. I said, I've never done a funeral service. They said, well, here's the Bible. Find some good passages. You'll do the service at the funeral home. And then you'll do the committal service at the cemetery. And I'll tell you, I was sweating bullets. So I'd call the family mainly to get some information. I said, I need to know something about the person so I can speak about the person, at least somewhat. So my first service, it went well. I did the funeral home service up there at Delton Troop Funeral Home. The family was happy with what happened. Went out to do the committal ceremony, and the funeral home director says, you stand at the head of, I didn't know what it says, you stand at the head of the casket and do the committal. And I had the committal stuff. Our post was doing the firing squad, doing the honors, and I'm on the honors squad also. So I did the honors, and they fired, and the funeral home director said, hey, you did a great job. He said, fine. She said, you do funerals. He said, in fact, here's $125. I said, I'll just donate it to the post. I said, I don't want to be paid for this. One of the things I really felt good about was doing the honors, going out to cemeteries and firing. We do what we call a post-everlasting ceremony where one of our members passes. We have a regular ceremony. I was always the chaplain at that ceremony. So 16 years later, being chaplain, I finally decided, it was a commitment. And I told them that they need to find a new chaplain. And they did that last year. Mm-hmm. And I'm still a member. I still support the post, go to the meetings, do everything I can do for them. Still in the honor guard, still in the color guard. Whenever they call me, say we got a funeral at Byron Cemetery, I'm out there and we're firing Springfield rifles, mm-hmm. where other people are firing the M16s and so forth. We still fire the Springfield 303 rifles. And it's amazing, the families come up to you and say, we thank you for providing honors for our passed away veteran. And that makes me feel good inside. And so at the Veterans of Foreign Wars, I became the House Committee chairperson. And my job there was to run the place, and I had this one guy who was, people said, you need to get him out of here. I said, well, we'll document. And finally I went up to him, I said, you're causing too many problems here. I said, you need to leave this post. He said, well, who do you think you are? I'm the House Committee chairperson. I said, you're done here. We're pulling your membership. He said, okay. And he left. And I only had one occasion at the American Legion. I don't want to get myself into these places. They said, we want you to be the canteen manager. Now I'm in charge of the canteen. So this one guy, he was getting drunk. He would leave when you talked to him. Well, one night he started throwing things. He said, bang, bang. So I called him and I said, we're going to pull your membership. I said, we can't put up with you trying to tear the place up. He said, well, I only do it when I'm drunk. I said, that's the only reason you're coming here, is to get drunk. So we pulled his membership. And the rest of the time was great. People were great. We had a good post. My only sorrows today is we lost our post, which I don't know whether you're aware of. The American Legion Post 526, which is on Broad Street, which is a beautiful building. We still had a mortgage on it, like $400,000, and we just weren't getting the people coming in to use the post. We did a lot of weddings in our big hall, and that helped pay, but we got behind on our mortgage, and finally the bank said it's time to foreclose. So then we moved down the street to another place, and we couldn't get enough money to keep it going. We were renting it. And now we're in the Fairborn Senior Center meeting, but at least we're keeping our charter, and that's the main thing. We just had elections, and we've got a commander, vice commander, and so forth, chaplain, adjutant. So we are trying to, and the membership chairperson, we're trying to recruit members. I have a list of people I got to call now. And I hate cold calling, but I'm going to call them and see if I can convince them. They're former members who left their membership, see if I can get them to come back into the post, because Congress only reacts to how many members do you have in your post. And right now, the American Legion has, I think, about 1.1 million members, and then the VFW comes in second. And then you have AMVETS and the Disabled American Veterans and so forth. But they only listen when you have the number of members. And that's why I'm a member of the Non-Commissioned Officers Association. I'm a life member of that. I'm a life member of the VFW, a life member of the American Legion, a life member of the Air Traffic Control and Communications Association, and I'm a member of the Air Force Sergeant Association. But I've been a member of that for probably 30 years. I just pay every year. Now it's 3 years. Every 3 years I pay. But I belong to those mainly because membership counts, and I support them. I used to go out to the VA all the time with the Air Force Sergeant Association to do things at the VA. So I think that's about it for my life.
Well, you've had a wonderful career, and you're involved in many different veterans organizations, which is wonderful. One last question.
Yes.
What message would you like to leave for future generations that might be viewing this interview?
What I would like to leave with, I think, is we need to love each other and get away from the hate. It tears me up when I watch on TV the hate going on and the hate that's against people. I don't believe in that. I believe everybody is equal, and I think if we loved everybody, life would be much better.
Well, thank you very much. Again, thank you for sharing your story with us. This is amazing.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Hope it was a good experience.
It was very good.
We really appreciate it, and we look forward to sharing this interview. So
Thank you very much.
thank you so much, and thank you for your service. This concludes the interview of Roger Sloan.
Thank you, Jeremy.